Hello, everyone. Belligerent Christian and I, linked to his channel in the description below, are back at it again. This time, we're going to discuss the resurrection of Jesus. To get straight to the resurrection itself, we're going to bypass the argument as to whether or not Jesus existed. I can say, for the sake of argument, that I'm reasonably convinced that there was a first century citizen of Judea named Jesus, and he was crucified under Governor Pontius Pilate. What I'm not convinced of is that Jesus resurrected 3 days after his death. I'm not convinced of this because there aren't any extra biblical sources contemporary with Jesus' life that claim he did resurrect 3 days after his death. And even if there were, they wouldn't necessarily be valid. Your video, History Lesson Tacitus, which I will include a link to in the description below, says that part of the Christian narrative is corroborated by a hostile witness, including the belief that Jesus was no, not that Jesus was resurrected. You didn't say that Jesus was resurrected. You didn't say that part was corroborated by hostile.
From what I can see, yeah.
It was just the crucifixion part, right?
Yeah, that he was crucified and that there was some kind of mysterious superstition that's that's Tacitus's and I believe Suetonius's words also.
Okay.
Yeah, that surrounding this Jesus figure, and then we have to go to the Christian sources to find out what these superstitions were. From what I can see from the hostile sources, they don't mention his resurrection specifically.
Okay, just that there is a new mysterious or mischievous belief.
Yeah, and then I, as a Christian, and also looking at the history surrounding it, can conclude reasonably that it's one of two things. And this I also hit on in the Tacitus video.
Yes.
That either they say that Jesus was God, that he rose from the dead, or even both. And I happen to think it is both.
Okay. Continuing. However, we must realize that Tacitus wasn't around for any of the events he writes about concerning Jesus in the Annals, so his information is, at the very best, secondary and was written at least 30 years after Jesus died. Therefore, there was plenty of time for the story to become legendary in the same way the Roswell incident was aggrandized. Would you disagree with any of what I said?
Well, it's not just that it was written at earliest 30 years before the events of Jesus' life. It was written about 90 years prior to, 90 years after the events of, the annals themselves were written, well, he died around 120, and his annals were published shortly before he actually passed. And some people think that he intended to write more of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
So other than that,
I hear an echo.
Uh-oh. You hear an echo on my end?
Yeah. Maybe it's just the room. Well, I don't hear myself. I just hear, I don't know, your voice changed. That's all.
Hello?
Whatever. I'll deal with it. It's fine.
Good. That's not what I wanted to happen. Well, I'm using all the same equipment that I used last time.
And it's okay. It sounds fine. I'm just saying your voice changed there. I don't know if you can hear yourself, but
no, I can't hear myself.
Oh, whatever. It's fine. It's fine.
Okay.
Yeah. What were we talking about?
So I said. So do you agree that what I said about Tacitus was true?
So the first claim that the first thing you said that the events that Tacitus is directly reporting happened 30 years after Jesus' death, and that is absolutely true. The Great Fire of Rome happened in 64 A.D. Tacitus, we think, was like 8 or 10 or 6 years old at the time, and likely not even in Rome at the time. But Tacitus is recording the history of what happened, and he also records some of the backstory to that history. So what Tacitus is telling us is that there is a large population of Christians living in Rome within 30 years after Jesus' death. That's directly what he's recording. He's also saying that there was enough of them. Well, I suppose I'd have to draw on other sources, but according to tradition, Peter was killed in 67 A.D. The Great Fire of Rome happened in 64 A.D. And Emperor Nero at the time, he was blaming the Christians, also in 64 A.D. And this persecution lasted long enough to kill Peter 3 years later. That means there's a lot of Christians hanging out in Rome, even while the persecution is going on. So we have a very large population of Christians living in Rome. That's all I'm trying to get at. Now, the backstory that Tacitus is also recording is the rest of it, that this new mischievous religion of Christianity started in Judea with a guy named Christus being killed under Pontius Pilate by crucifixion.
Yes, I mentioned that.
Yeah. So that's
okay. Yeah, so we agree. So basically, we're in agreement as to what I've said, that
Tacitus is a secondary source historically. Correct. Yeah.
Yes, Tacitus is secondary. He wrote a long time after, and that there was a first century guy in Judea named Christus who was crucified under Pontius Pilate.
Right.
We read all the details. Okay. So since we agree on that, I guess I can move on to the next point. I can return to that point shortly. What I'm saying will come back around to it. Okay. Also, you mentioned a Roman edict formerly known as the Nazareth inscription as being potential evidence of Jesus' resurrection. You claimed that the inscription is evidence that Jesus rose from the dead because it dates to around his lifetime and that it forbids grave robbing.
Something like that, yeah. I think it was in the 40s. AD.
It was the Roman response to the empty tomb. That was your claim?
Yeah. So a little bit of backstory on that is that within the Bible, which we're not accepting yet, but within the claims of the Bible, they say that the Pharisees and the Sadducees, the Sanhedrin and the Jewish authorities, claimed that no, Jesus didn't rise from the dead. The disciples stole the body. Now, if that's true, that makes sense with this inscription, because the Jews and the Christians were then still in the same community. They were hanging out in the same synagogues. They were still both calling themselves Jews. But they were clashing with each other over this religious question of who is Jesus. Now, the Romans hated conflict. Okay, the Pax Romana is over the entire Roman world. People who cause disturbances are punished severely. And in order to stop this this question of resurrections from happening again, they put out the edict saying no more grave robbing. And hopefully that'll stop things. They're obviously not on the Christian side on this, but they're acknowledging what the Christians are claiming. Yes. Marco?
Polo.
Okay.
Yes. I heard everything you said. It just cut out for a few seconds briefly, but I heard everything.
Cool.
Like everything you said.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So to continue with that, it dates to between 50 BC, 50 AD, and it forbids grave robbing. There is, however, no hard evidence to indicate that the inscription refers to or was written because of Jesus' resurrection.
Sure.
If it was written in Galilee, then it couldn't have been written earlier than 44 AD, because that's when Romans occupied the territory. As such, because there is no precise date, author, or cause for the inscription, no argument can be made for it being a Roman response to the empty tomb.
But the only reason we say that is because we're not accepting the Bible as historical evidence, which is fine. We can go. Which is fine. We can go in other directions.
No, I mean I missed the first thing you said before you said the thing about the Bible.
I don't think I said anything. I just said that that I would only put forward the inscription as secondary evidence that the Bible is true.
So if we don't accept that the Bible is true, if we take the edict, the Nazareth inscription on its own without reference to any biblical text, then we see that it can't be provided as support, as independent support that Jesus was resurrected.
Yeah, and here's the thing about history. Nothing on its own stands as evidence.
Hello?
Yes.
Hello?
Hello? Hello? Marco?
Okay, you keep cutting out.
Okay, sorry.
Okay, so you said thinking about history.
Yeah. Okay. So the way history works and the way any argument works is that no single premise stands on its own as justification for anything. It needs corroboration. It needs to work together within a larger system to prove a point.
Yes.
Yeah.
True.
So the Nazareth inscription alone proves nothing. The Gospel of Matthew alone proves nothing. The words of Tacitus alone prove nothing. But when you put them all together, now we have a clear picture of what Christianity is saying about Christ.
Okay, well that actually brings us to the last thing I wrote, which addresses how you don't use the Bible as or to support your arguments. You're using these historical things outside the Bible to support your arguments.
Correct. And the only reason I do that is because you don't accept the Bible. So I have to find other ways to get into your brain that this is true.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
that's what that's about.
So I want to say, finally, you don't use the Bible to support your arguments because the Bible is the claim, not the evidence, and I appreciate that you recognize the importance of extra-biblical sources. However, extra-biblical sources don't attest to either the resurrection or the burial of Jesus in a tomb. Thus, your position cannot contain those points. Tacitus only tells us there was a first-century person named Christ, as well as a few other details, and the Nazareth inscription doesn't give us any actual proof of a Roman response to the resurrection. Other artifacts, like the Shroud of Turin, don't prove anything regarding Christ, and other historians, like Josephus, are in the same boat as Tacitus. In conclusion, there is not historical evidence for the resurrection. There is evidence there was a Jesus, but not that he performed miracles, resurrected, or was the Son of God. To prove any of those, you'd have to have extra biblical evidence of them, which we haven't seen.
Okay,
So,
and if we're accepting that Jesus existed in the first century, this is good. And then, and if we accept things like Tacitus and Suetonius telling us that there are large populations of Christians in existence in the middle of the first century AD, this is also very good for my point, because from here I go to the apostles, and this is like my core question. Maybe you've seen it, where I say Jesus died by crucifixion. The apostles claimed that he rose from the dead. What do you say happened? Now, you've already agreed with that first point, that Jesus was in fact crucified under Pontius Pilate. So now your question is, how do we know that the apostles claimed that Jesus rose from the dead?
how do we know they were telling
Correct.
the truth on their claim? Yes. Or at least how do we know that they really did see the resurrection? Yes.
Well, we don't even know that they really saw the resurrection, at least not from your point of view. What they're claiming is that, what we have to prove first is that they actually claimed that Jesus rose from the dead.
What is
Does that
the
make
source
sense?
of their what is the source of their claims, though?
How do we know that they claimed that Jesus rose from the dead?
Where can we look in history to see the evidence that they made these claims?
Okay, so it's more secondary sources, and they're from the church fathers. These are guys like Tertullian, Origen, Ignatius, Irenaeus, men who lived in the 2nd century AD, but had very good knowledge of who the apostles were and what they claimed. And these guys are telling us about, and these guys are from all over. One was from Alexandria in Egypt. Another one was in Greece. Another in Rome. So these guys are all over, and they're all claiming that the apostles claimed that Jesus rose from the dead.
So what we have here is essentially a long game of telephone.
Not a very long game.
We have
It's only two calls removed.
I'm accepting that Tacitus makes a few fairly mundane claims about a guy in the Roman Empire, which is, I mean, what happened to Jesus is not his death and everything. That wasn't unusual. A lot of people died in that way.
Right.
So as far as his life goes, Tacitus only talks about the more mundane parts of his life, not the turning water into wine or making loaves and fishes out of thin air to give.
He doesn't
people.
even talk about the mundane parts of Jesus' life. He just says this guy died.
I thought I read it. Okay, you're probably right, but at any rate, but that only strengthens my point, though, which is that the secondary sources whom we're said we can trust, whom we're told we can trust, because Tacitus is considered to be a reliable source of ancient history, a very reliable source, and the Annals is very well regarded. But what we get is not a picture that helps the resurrection. Sure, there were Christians, Christianity was spreading. Okay, that's great. That doesn't tell us anything supernatural about what was going on. I mean, yes, there was Suetonius, Pliny the Younger, I think.
Yes.
He was one of the, and others, and they were talking about the spread of Christianity. Well, I have no problem with that, again, because that's fine. But the issue isn't whether or not Christianity was spreading. The issue is the central claim by Christians, which doesn't have any outside corroboration. What we get outside of the Bible, because the apostles are all in the Bible, what we get outside from Tacitus and Josephus, and, well, with the exception of one generally regarded as a forged quote from
Flavius Josephus.
Yeah.
I mean, the only reason people don't like what Flavius Josephus is, well, I mean, first and foremost, we think I forget which piece it was. It wasn't the part about James, but the part where he actually talked about Jesus.
He said basically that there was this wise Jew or something like that, and then that was the part where historians say...
this is the reconstruction of like what Flavius probably actually wrote. Is that what
they're like, okay, well...
He
probably didn't actually say that.
Yeah, so that's the first reason why people disregard Josephus. But the second
he
reason,
still said other important things, though. There were other things he said.
Yes, he did. Absolutely.
But I just want to point out that, extra biblically speaking, none of these guys, hostile or otherwise, are saying anything about a resurrection. They're just noting the spread of Christianity.
Now, I've conceded one point to you already, and that's that you're right. The hostile sources don't... And the hostile sources don't attest to a resurrection. You're right. But I'll concede a second point to you that the neutral sources don't attest to a resurrection. And I put Flavius Josephus in this category.
Because he's Jewish?
Not because he's Jewish, but because he doesn't say Jesus rose from the dead.
Okay.
Yeah. But the friendly sources do. And the friendly sources are what the secondary hostile sources are talking about when they say that these Christians believed some mysterious superstition concerning Jesus. We go to the friendly sources to find out what these Christians were claiming.
So my question is, who are the friendly sources?
Right. So, again, I need to read up on these guys, but who was it that... I think it was Irenaeus or Ignatius who heard Polycarp preach, and Polycarp was a disciple of John, and who we also have a letter from.
Wait.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, so you said so Ignatius was a disciple of Polycarp.
Are you writing this down? Paper, pencil? Okay, so start at the top, write Jesus. Put him in a circle.
Okay.
And then a line down.
To John.
Yep, line down, put John.
To Polycarp, to Ignatius, right?
Yep, to Polycarp, to Ignatius, or Irenaeus. I think it's Irenaeus.
Okay, I'll just put Ignatius or Irenaeus.
Yeah. And then after Ignatius and Irenaeus, there's one more name that I can't remember, and this is the lineage for how we know that the Bible is true. But that's a separate conversation where we won't go into. But the point here is that in there is two of the names, and I forget which is which, Irenaeus and Ignatius. These are guys called the Church Fathers, influential figures from right after the time of the Apostles, and they tell us what the Apostles claimed.
Okay. Yeah, I'm looking at Irenaeus, Saint Irenaeus, bishop of Lugdunum in Gaul, part of the Roman Empire, was an early church father and apologist, and his writings were formative in the early development of Christian theology.
Yep, sounds right. He doesn't mention Polycarp, and you can look up all these names, sure, but yeah, there's Ignatius, Irenaeus, Tertullian. I like Tertullian. Clement. Yeah, Clement. There's a few Clements running around, so mind which one. Yeah,
like Josephus's. There are multiple Josephus. Okay.
Yeah. Let's see. There's one more. Did I mention Origen?
No, but I have heard of Origen before. I have heard of him.
Yeah. So yeah, these are the church fathers, and like I said, these are the guys we go to find out what the apostles claimed. Okay, and these guys talk about resurrection.
So, we'll stick with Irenaeus. So Irenaeus heard from Polycarp, who heard from John.
Yes.
Who and John was one of the acclaimed witnesses of Jesus after his or post-mortem experiences.
Yep.
So what we're getting again is Irenaeus, a story, from Polycarp, another story from another guy who is telling other people about the experience that he had.
Right, but again, Irenaeus alone proves nothing. It's that it's Irenaeus, Ignatius, Origen, all these guys saying the same thing.
Okay,
about what the apostles said.
Right. Okay, but again, I'm not contesting that Christianity spread or that the story of Jesus spread. I'm not contesting that. My problem is with the source itself. Is the story true? Whether or not the story is true, it can spread all over the whole world as it has. But does that make it true? Just because the story travels, does that make it true? Yes or no?
Okay. So
I mean, yes or no?
Does that a story spreads? No, that's not. That doesn't make it true.
Exactly.
Now, but here's what we're taking away from the church fathers is that the apostles made this claim.
Right.
Yeah, and another thing that we take away from the church fathers is that the apostles died for that claim.
That was actually something interesting I came across fairly recently. Who is in control of the stories of the apostles?
It's oral tradition for a long time until people like Jerome. I know maybe it wasn't Jerome, but Eusebius for sure. But he's really late.
Oh yeah, he's one of the historian guys, isn't he?
What's that? Yeah, Jerome is very late. I think he's it's 4th century when he actually records and writes down the ways that the apostles were martyred, according to him. And then we have conflicting testimonies, and that's because again it's very late.
So, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So But what we do know is that very early on, it is claimed that many of the apostles have been martyred.
Yes.
The way we use martyr for martyring, witnessing the to the claim of the resurrection.
Yes. And so I was doing some research on that recently, and
it's something I need to do more research on too. But yeah,
it's very interesting stuff. One of the things was one of the things I came across was how Judas died, and there were like conflicting accounts in the Bible of how Judas died. It was like one he was like executed in one, and then he just like fell over and died in the other one. Wasn't that it?
Yes. So like so this is a sidebar conversation, but so this is what I'm working on right now is a response to a little video called Quiz Show, Bible Contradictions. It's by someone called
Non-Stamp Collector.
Yeah, so I'm doing a response, and what I'm doing is harmonizing what Non-Stamp Collector is claiming are contradictions.
Yeah, I saw your first video.
Yeah, and this could be one of them. So one what was it? One of the accounts of Judas is that he went out to a field and hung himself. And then the other account of how Judas died is that
his guts
he went headlong and his guts split. And it's all the gory details.
Yeah.
I mean, the simple way to harmonize these is to say he hung himself, falling headlong, and his guts spilled out. I mean, this isn't a contradiction. These are two things telling us, providing different details of the same account.
I mean, I guess wouldn't someone argue it's hard to fall headlong if you hung yourself?
I don't think so. I mean, we don't know.
You're falling down, and so one is he hung himself, the other is he fell. And so, I mean, I think it'd kind of be hard to fall headlong. I don't know. That's just me. I don't know as much
really.
about it.
I mean, here's I'll paint the picture of what's going on in my head. So we've got Judas. He's in a tree. He's on a branch. He's tied the neck. He's tied a rope to one end to his neck, the other end to the branch that he's standing on. He stands up and lets himself fall headlong downward, and then his guts blow open and blah blah blah. That's the picture that's in my head.
Okay, I'll have to take your word for it until I do more research on it.
Right. Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Okay, but back to the conversation. We were talking about Irenaeus and Ignatius and the other guys. So, oh, that's right. We were talking about the martyrs. The apostles were martyred in a general sense, or modern sense. So what I was reading, what I came across was that one. That argument actually caused me a lot of pause. Made me wonder, how do we know? This is actually one of the arguments that caused me the most pause. It's how do we know that what they're saying? How can we tell if what they're saying is true? Because they're the ones saying it. And how do we know? And they died for their beliefs, or as far as we know historically, they died for their beliefs. And so, what I realized, or what I found out from reading, is that all of the tales, or stories, I guess, whatever you want to call it, all the stories about the deaths of the apostles come from the church, the entity that would benefit the most from their martyrdom. It all comes from Apocrypha and the church fathers and oral tradition that is within the early church.
You would think so, but something that we don't realize here in the 21st century is that back then, if your religious leader dies, that's not a glorious thing.
True.
I mean, if going back to something we haven't conceded yet, if the apostles made it up, they wouldn't have Jesus dying. They would have him living gloriously forever. If Jesus was a complete fabrication.
But I think
If
that's
the
kind of
church, yeah, but if the church had made up the apostles, then they would have the apostles living gloriously and ruling over this beautiful church that they've got going on, which they're not calling a church yet, I don't think.
right.
Um,
Well, temple or whatever, what have you.
Being killed for what you believe means that your religion fails. And so it wouldn't have been reported if it was false. But since the church itself is telling everyone that these guys died for what they believed, this actually lends credit to the idea that the apostles did actually die for their beliefs, not the other way around. It would be the enemies who claim that the apostles and that Christians in general were being killed if they want to disprove Christianity, or at least argue against it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I suppose my question would be, how do we know that the only way the early church would communicate what they believe to be true is by what was the way I was going to put it?
Take your time.
No, yeah.
Yeah.
We got all day. Yeah.
Speaking
How
of
do we
which,
know that
I've
the
got
church...
about an hour and a half.
Okay, no, I probably won't take that long. I was gonna say, how do we know the church wouldn't use their martyrdom as evidence that these guys are so convinced of their beliefs that they died for them? How do we know the church wouldn't use that as evidence in favor of their beliefs?
So one thing I want to concede off the bat is that yes, we do think that some churches did that, particularly church out in I think it's Asia Minor and then to the east.
Well, see, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So they've got I won't say that. I'll say they've got a thing for martyrdom. Like getting martyred is it becomes a very virtuous thing.
Okay.
In them. So so there are conflicting accounts of how some apostles died. Okay. And I think that's mostly due to the way in which the church to the east of Asia Minor does its theology. But
interesting.
Yeah. What was the other thing I was going to say?
Apostles martyrdom.
Right. So the thing that we need to remember is that getting killed for what you believe in those times actually disproves or is credited against what they're claiming.
What about Spartacus?
What about Spartacus?
He died, or he was executed for what he believed in.
Yes.
But I mean,
I don't know what you're saying. Fill out the picture for me.
Was what he was trying to do considered a failure because he was martyred?
In the authorities' eyes, yes. I would say so.
Okay.
And in the eyes of everyone who didn't believe in what Spartacus was fighting for, yes, they would also not stand up to Rome. But I'm unfamiliar with the history of Spartacus, so
okay.
But do you see what I'm saying, though?
But okay, so what we're still talking. So back to the apostles. So we're still talking about that they died for their beliefs. At least that's what the Bible says, and that's what the early church says.
Yeah, and the specific thing that I'm driving for is that they died for the claim that Jesus rose from the dead.
As far as the Bible says, yes. But do we have? I mean, sure, I'll take your word for it that they believe they had some experiences or whatever where they something happened or some things happened, and they believed their experiences meant X, and they died for X. They died for their beliefs. But again, that doesn't prove the validity of their.
Go ahead and just fill in X as Jesus rose from the dead. Just go ahead and fill that in there.
Okay, let's say
this becomes important.
Okay, let's just say they believed through maybe one action or a series of actions that Jesus did in fact rise from the dead and appear to them after post-mortem. Just because they believe that, again, this is all in the Bible, does that make it true?
Again, we're leave the Bible out. Okay, we're talking church fathers. What the church fathers claimed that the apostles claimed.
Well, the church fathers claimed from claims of claims, from what you're telling me. Ignatius or Irenaeus claimed from or heard from Polycarp, who heard from John. So we're kind of back to this. It's telephoning. It's like, I mean, maybe the story was not intentionally altered. There was no one was purposefully lying, but maybe by accident, as humans misremember things, maybe the story was affected and passed along.
Okay, so we're backing up from the apostles claim something. It's how do we know that the apostles actually claim this? So here's what I say on that. The church fathers are all over. The church itself is also all over. And the testimonies that the apostles died for their claims, whatever they may be, are also all over.
Well,
how does this get to be all over?
Well, that's not really. Wait. The information from the apostles, that's not all over. That's in the Bible. What we have, some stories that were repeated to guys and then later told to the church fathers. And again, I'm not contesting that Christianity and the Christian meta-narrative spread. I'm not contesting that at all. Mm-hmm. I agree that seems to have happened from everything I've read. Mm-hmm. And so, but again, that's not the issue here. The issue isn't whether the story spread. The issue is how do we know that the resurrection is true.
Right.
And so far, what you've told me is these guys, is Irenaeus, the church fathers, heard from guys who heard from the guys who claimed to have had these experiences. So that's not it's a pretty tenuous argument.
Correct, and that's not quite my argument. Please understand, okay. I'm not saying that all these people said that Jesus rose from the dead, therefore we should believe that Jesus rose from the dead. That's not what I'm claiming. What I'm claiming is that all of these people are making the same claim about, and on this, we're not talking about Jesus, we're talking about the apostles and how they behaved after they purportedly saw Jesus alive. Are you seeing what I'm saying? I need to find a better way of wording this.
We're circling the same point, which I think we're talking about the same thing. We're talking about the apostles told their story to other guys who then told the stories, and that story spread throughout the Roman Empire, to Egypt, to Greece. The story spread.
To Rome, Tacitus,
Exactly. And the church fathers later are
much later in some cases, right?
Much later are.
We're concerned with the early ones. So
Ignatius, for example, was born in 130 AD, so like 100 years after Jesus died, pretty much.
Yeah, it's not, and if that's the case, then it sounds like he's the guy who heard from Polycarp. So yeah.
Okay, so yeah, this story has had the story of what the apostles claim to have seen has had over 100 years, because if they're telling it to people, I mean, if they're telling it to people, right after it happened, or maybe a few years after it happened, it's still going to be over 100 years before someone tells it to Irenaeus, because he's not going to be, 10 years old when he becomes a church father. He's going to be
Yeah.
maybe 20 or 30 or something like that. So it's going to be over 100 years later when these stories are coming to the guys who are like, okay, we gotta write this all down. We gotta make sure it's all in one place. That's a very long time. That's a very long time. And you're familiar with the Roswell incident?
No, I'm not.
Okay, so the Roswell incident was in the 1950s, I think.
Sure.
In Arizona, we'll just say for sake of argument, 1950s.
Yeah.
So this guy basically, he goes out into the desert. Wait for it. You don't know. You don't trust me. You don't know the ending of the story.
Okay, I don't know.
He goes out into the desert and he finds some sticks and tinfoil. Well, within 30 years, just 30 simple years, the story transformed from this guy found sticks and tinfoil in the desert to he was abducted by aliens to it's a huge government cover-up. And so that's in the information age. And so if a story can go from a guy did nothing and turned into a huge government cover-up, which is spread all over the United States, which, I mean, you know, it's not very difficult in the information age, but I mean, it's pretty easy. Only takes a few minutes, I guess. But this story became hugely exaggerated because maybe people weren't telling it. They weren't necessarily lying. I think lying means there's an intent to deceive. I think it's accidental misremembering if you're not saying exactly what you remember. And so maybe these people who were telling the story afterwards were accidentally misremembering what was told to them. And so in just 30 years, everyone had heard the story of alien abduction in the desert and government cover-up. So it's not hard for stories to get accidentally or to grow accidentally. I mean, that happens. It happens in our own time. And so I think that in Jesus's own time, or in the 1st century or 2nd century, when a lot of stories are told by oral tradition, it's certainly not hard to accidentally change a story.
Okay, now
I'm not saying anyone was lying. I'm not saying there was any intent to deceive. I'm just saying we don't know that all the facts are necessarily as they occur. That all the story is necessarily what happened.
Okay, and here's what I'll say to that. The in fact, this story of Jesus and what happened to him was changing in those first 3 centuries before the Council of Nicaea. The Bible is canonized and Christianity becomes the religion of the empire.
For reference, the Council of Nicaea was what year?
325 AD. That is a very, very important date. It's the one I hang a lot of my arguments on.
Okay.
In your research, did you come across the Gnostics?
The Gnostics. Were
spelled G-N-O.
Yeah. Were they the Jesus is like God incarnate? Who were refresh my memory because I don't remember.
Okay, so the Gnostics are a group of heretics, and then there's also other heresies going on. And the only reason I bring them up is because they are claiming things like, oh, Jesus was only a spiritual representation of God. He wasn't actually real. Or that, oh, he didn't actually rise from the dead. Or, oh, he wasn't actually God and man at the same time. These are the guys who are changing the story. But the vast majority of the church rejects this. Rejects that much more feasible interpretation of who Jesus was. And these are the guys who actually made people like Tertullian, Origen, Irenaeus famous, is because these guys are arguing against the Gnostics. So yes, the story is changing, but it changes in different ways in different places. And the reason that we know that the story we have today is the one that started is because that's the story that's spread everywhere over the early church.
Okay, I mean,
Does
I
that
see
make
what you're
sense?
saying. I mean, I see what you're
Yeah.
saying, but that still doesn't make the story true. And also,
Right, but what it does prove, and what we are trying to go for here is this the story that the apostles told?
well, we don't know. I
How
mean,
so?
we have what they are claimed to have said from many years after the fact. But I mean, even if they did, even if this is really what they said, if those are their words in the Bible, they said that they saw this, then okay, even if that those are their exact words, okay, I'm fine with that. I don't see any problem with that. But that still doesn't make the story true, and none of these
Correct.
arguments have pointed really to the veracity of the story.
Correct.
Okay, so
All we're going for right now with this talk of the Gnostics and how a story changes over time, all I'm trying to go for here is to show you that the story that we have is what the apostles actually claimed. Have I demonstrated that for you sufficiently?
we have what is claimed that they said. Yes, I agree. We have what is claimed that they said.
Okay,
So,
good.
and so going from there,
Okay, so now we have the complete question. Jesus died by crucifixion. His apostles claim that he was alive 3 days later. Do you agree with this? These first two things?
I agree we have claims that they said it, claims that come either from the Bible or from guys over 100 years later.
Don't worry about the Bible. The Bible is 325
Okay.
AD. We don't care about that.
Okay, so we have at the very best tertiary or quaternary sources from over 100 years later.
But it's stories that are everywhere and largely, how do I put it better than that?
They're largely unchanged. Is that what you're going
Largely identical to each other, which means that they have an earlier source. And I think that earlier source goes all the way back to the apostles themselves.
for? You've heard of Philo of Alexandria?
Heard of, haven't studied at all.
Okay, so Philo of Alexandria is, from what I've read, I came across him. He is a philosopher. He's a Jewish philosopher and historian from first century Judea. He was born before Jesus and died after Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And yet he never mentioned any of the Jesus story.
Did he live in the same place as Jesus?
He lived in Judea. Let me look it up. Philo of Alexandria.
I mean, because I hear his name and I immediately think, oh, this guy lives in Alexandria. But I want to make sure that that's actually the case.
Actually, I could be wrong. This might not be the right guy.
Yeah. Okay.
This might. Nope. This is not. Well. Okay. Well, nope. This guy lived in Egypt, so I was wrong on that. Okay.
Yeah,
so
that's okay.
That's someone else. Okay. Well, in that case, disregard any and all statements made by the.
Okay. No worries.
His ancestors. Okay. Well, this says his ancestors had connections to priesthood in Judea, but not that he lived there.
Okay.
And okay. No, he didn't live there. He lived in Egypt. He lived in Egypt.
But was this his whole life long? Did he never travel to?
Basically, that's it. Just he might have moved around. Let's see he went to.
Yeah, I'm just asking you all these questions to see if there's actually something here that we can use,
just see if
either for or against.
Well, the point that I was making was that he lived before, or he was born before Jesus, died after Jesus, and yet he doesn't attest, and he's Jewish, and yet doesn't attest to any of the stories that are claimed of Jesus. He died 50 CE and was born 25 BCE.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And so he heard none of the he never mentioned Jesus, never talked about the apostles, or I guess, or maybe he talked about.
Right.
So the point I'm trying to make is that we have a guy who should have written about that kind of stuff because he's a philosopher and a historian, and yet he doesn't write about Jesus or anything, or what the apostles said about Jesus or anything like that. We don't see.
Is he recording Jewish history? I'm just worried. It doesn't impact what I'm going to say, but
he harmonized Jewish scripture, mainly the Torah, with Greek philosophy. His method followed the practices of both Jewish exegesis and Stoic philosophy. His allegorical exegesis was important for several Christian church fathers, but he has barely any reception history with rabbinic Judaism. He believed that literal interpretations of the Hebrew Bible would stifle humanity's perception of a God too complex and marvelous to be understood in literal human terms.
Wait, say that bit again? What's he saying?
He said believing in a literal interpretation of the Hebrew Bible would lead you to believe incorrect things about God's nature, essentially. He said because God is too complex and too marvelous to be understood in literal human terms.
Where have I heard that before? Oh, yeah, Islam.
Well, it's kind of an interesting interpretation, I guess.
Yeah. Okay, well, as far as him being a historian and not a Jewish historian and not covering the life of Christ at all, that doesn't surprise me very much. And the reason that doesn't surprise me is because Judaism continues to exist after the death of Christ. Yeah, I mean, so that someone doesn't take the claims of Jesus seriously, the claims of the apostles seriously within Judaism. I mean, the temple itself stood until around 70 AD, and the nation of Israel continued to exist without being Christianized until about that same time when they're crushed by the Roman Empire. So no, it doesn't surprise me at all that someone doesn't take note and doesn't write about it.
You think it's not surprising at all that this guy who made it his life work to write about philosophic ideas within Judaism and philosophy would never have mentioned at all the claims of these Jewish guys in another part of the Roman Empire?
No, it doesn't. And check this out. This is a separate conversation, but check this out. I mean, who's Philo dealing with? He's a Jew dealing with Greeks, an Orthodox Jew who's not taking his own scripture literally, which is fine as far as I'm concerned. But and he's dealing with the Greeks. What does Jesus have to do with this conversation? Almost nothing. It's a fringe movement within his own faith. But again, he doesn't care about the literal scripture. Why would he care that someone is claiming to literally be God? It doesn't make any sense from his own point of view to write about this guy, this Christ character.
But I mean, even if he doesn't believe the story literally, you're still saying it doesn't make any sense for him to mention it at all as a philosopher.
No, what I'm saying is that it is believable that he wouldn't mention it at all. Entirely believable.
Okay.
I mean, this is something that occurred to me like early on in our conversation.
I'll just have to take your word for it.
Yeah, but you've heard the quote, "Absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence."
I mean, I'm not claiming that. I'm not going to say absolutely that Jesus didn't resurrect or that the apostles didn't witness it or anything like that. I'm just saying there's no hard evidence to indicate that they did. I'm not saying it necessarily
Okay,
didn't happen.
yeah, but I'm just talking about Philo here, like, and that's just one little axiom that I'm throwing out. Like, just because Philo didn't write about it doesn't mean that it didn't happen. That's all I'm saying.
I mean, I'm accepting what you're saying about it. I'm accepting it because I'm ignorant on the topic in most
And thank you very much.
regards.
Yeah.
I'm just saying I find it a little bit odd. Maybe that's just me. Probably is that this guy whose job it is to write about philosophy just didn't mention these claims. And maybe I'm wrong in that regard. Maybe he just didn't really care, and maybe that's the way it is. Maybe it was the way he wrote. And okay,
yeah.
if that is, then all right. but the point about,
but it's odd, is what you're saying, and yeah, I think it's also odd. But then again, I think it's odd that Judaism would reject Christ at all. So, whatever.
Well, but I guess back to the apostles. We're still, with regard to them, we're still talking about what is claimed about their claims, and then that's passed along to the church fathers eventually, to the early church fathers.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, so we're talking about claims of claims of claims.
So if I'm okay, so wait, I want to pause that for a moment. I want to make sure we're on the same page. So as far as Tacitus and Josephus go, they are, and yes or no to this, they are later secondary sources who don't mention the resurrection. Yes?
Josephus, we don't know because we think his writing was doctored, and the rest of his writing doesn't indicate that he was a Christian.
Okay,
so on Josephus, it's just a really big question mark and probably on the no side.
Okay, but
and then
thus
Tacitus,
far we have,
he absolutely doesn't.
Okay, and so the Nazareth inscription, we also agree that it wasn't necessarily a Roman response to the empty tomb. We don't have any hard evidence for that.
Until we accept the Bible and the claims of the apostles and the Jewish ruling authorities.
But like you said, we're not.
True.
But like you said, we're not taking the Bible true.
No.
Okay. And so what we've been talking about.
We're getting there.
So what we've been talking about is the claim of resurrection. Is the claim of resurrection that was passed along to some guys, that was later passed along to other guys. So stories of stories of stories, or stories of claims, I guess. We'll say the original story is the claim.
Sure.
So right now, the argument that's being made is Jesus' resurrection is true because of tertiary or quaternary sources many years after the fact.
No, my argument is that Jesus rose from the dead, and the apostles themselves claim that Jesus rose from the dead. And my question is, what do you say happened? I think once you get there, there's no rational explanation
Holy crap.
for the way the apostles behaved after that.
Whoa.
Yeah, again, we're still getting there. We're still getting there. We're not there yet.
I just saw that we have a whole bunch of messages in our live chat.
Oh, snap. Hi, people.
And I said, holy crap. I just realized there are only 3 people watching it right now, but Peter and somebody else are basically talking. Wow, okay. Goodness. Well, that's interesting. They just
We're
noted,
important.
they just noted that
buddy.
I think it's very funny. They just noted the person he's talking to says, "Uh-oh, they saw us." That's funny. Oh well. Anyways, but okay. So you ask me. It's her. Okay. All right. So you ask me, what do I think happened? Well,
I don't think we're there yet. That's the question that I ask once we accept that the first two statements are true. That's where we're trying to go, is what I'm saying.
Two statements were, again, could you repeat for me? Because I lost my train of thought.
Yeah. So my question in its totality.
Okay.
Jesus died by crucifixion. His disciples claimed that 3 days later he was alive. What do you say happened? And then into this, I bring the behavior of the disciples after their claim that Jesus rose from the dead. And I think there's no rational way to answer this question other than to say, yeah, Jesus actually rose from the dead. So that's where I'm going.
Okay, so the question is not what happened, but what is the explanation for the apostles' actions in their latter days?
Right, and that's what I'm going for.
Okay.
We're not there yet. Yeah.
Well, again, what we see from the apostles is not, we don't see extra biblical allusions during their own lifetime or references. We don't see we don't see Romans talking about a mischievous superstition that's spreading all over the place or anything like that, or the claims have changed or what have you.
Well, no. Be charitable. We do have Tacitus. We do have Suetonius.
But
something is going on in the first century.
But that's again not during the time it's happening. That's again at least a secondary, at the very, very best, a secondary source. At least, how many years did you say? He was born in 56, so when did he write Annals?
He wrote Annals sometime between, I think it's, after 100 AD.
Okay, so like 70 years later.
Yeah, after the event of Jesus' crucifixion. At about 40 years after the event of the Great Fire of Rome, for which the Christians are blamed, and yeah.
Okay, so,
but give that some credit, because that means there's a large population of Christians in Rome and all over the world. Yeah. Okay, yeah.
I have repeatedly agreed that Tacitus says what he says, and that there's a population of Christians. But I've also said that that's not the issue. It's not the problem whether or not there was a large population of Christians. That's not the issue. How many people believe the story isn't problematic?
What it does show is that there are many people who are taking the claim seriously. Something happened. Well, whether it's just evangelism by the apostles or by someone else, again, that's what we're driving towards with our talk of the church fathers.
I don't think we can really invoke the church fathers as an argument, because there again, it seemed from what you told me, at the very best, tertiary sources. So these are at least 3 people later, or perhaps 2 people later. Even if somehow it's only 2 people later, they're still only secondary sources at the absolute best.
Okay, let me draw another analogy for you. And the analogy I'm going to draw is the Bible. Again, we don't care about what the Bible is true. I just want to illustrate something else by analogy. In the world of biblical textual criticism, people who take the Bible seriously and find out where it came from and how it changed, one of the things they can do is see where different manuscripts turn up and how the manuscripts change between each other. And then you can also see what copyist errors spread to what locations. So let's say someone copying one of the Gospels is writing, and she said Rabboni, which means teacher.
Okay.
When something that can happen is, well, Rabboni actually doesn't just mean teacher, it means my teacher. So one of the copiers says, okay, here's what she said. She said Rabboni, which means my teacher, and that becomes the new source. And we can track where that new, where that extra addition of the word my goes across the world. So let's say that that particular one spread to Egypt, okay? And we can see that everywhere else it says, and she said Rabboni, which means teacher, but in Egypt it says, and she said Rabboni, which means my teacher. We see that change, and we can track how it changes. Does that make sense?
Okay,
So
I'm
far?
following you. So the point is...
So the point is, when we have the same claim, Jesus actually died, Jesus actually rose again from the dead, Jesus was actually God. When we have that core message all over everywhere, what that means is that we can say, yes, this is what the original source actually said. We don't have a game of telephone. We have...
Well, we do actually have a game of telephone in that case, because even if we are taking their claim seriously, we're saying... even if we're taking the claim seriously, the claim is still being telephoned from one person to another. It's being telephoned from John to Polycarp to Irenaeus. And
yes,
so,
and we have that lineage, and if there was a change in there, we could track how that's different from the claims that are made across the rest of the world, which would change differently and in different ways. But the fact that the claims are the same between what Irenaeus said, Polycarp said, what was what John said, or between what Ignatius and whoever Ignatius heard from, and let's say Tertullian, even what Tertullian claimed, the fact that they're all identical means that this is probably what John and his cohorts actually said.
does the similarity among people of a claim make that claim true?
No. What it means is that it's the actual claim.
Okay, I get that. I get that this is the claim being made, that Jesus was resurrected. I get that.
Okay.
That's not that I don't have a problem with that. The issue isn't what's being said, it's the truth of what's being said. And so far we haven't covered whether or not that claim is true. We've talked about there are people who have repeated that claim.
You are absolutely correct, yes.
And the closest we've gotten to it is the apostles died, which we talked some about earlier, and as I pointed out, just because someone dies for a claim doesn't necessarily make the claim true, but at the same time...
Okay, we'll get there. Okay.
Okay, but
yes,
okay.
So far you are absolutely correct. Yes.
Okay, so all we've talked about, or all we have established thus far, what we're both hunky-dory on, is that the claim of Jesus' resurrection was spread.
Yes.
Throughout the Roman Empire, to Egypt, to Greece, etc.
And not just by anyone, but by the apostles.
Well, we haven't gotten there either. What we have gotten to is that the church fathers heard it from guys who are claiming to have heard it from the apostles. Or at least, does Polycarp specifically say, because I don't know, does he specifically say, like, John told me that he saw Jesus' resurrection? Does Polycarp say that?
I can't imagine that he didn't, but I don't know. I could look it up. Again, these are people that I need to look up to.
Okay, well, let's say you did. I'll just take your word for it. I'll say, okay, so John said, Polycarp, hey, I saw Jesus' resurrection. Or Jesus appeared to me post-mortem. Perfectly fine. Okay. So he does that. And what we get to, once we dig back through all the layers of he said, she said, we get to the people who actually made the claims, the apostles. And this is the important part. The apostles are really the crux of the argument at this point. Okay. I'm agreeing with you that John probably told Polycarp that he saw Jesus post-mortem appearance. That's fine. But
Okay, now can we throw in the rest of the apostles too? Peter,
okay, sure.
Paul. Okay,
The whole
good, because
okay.
that's also very, very important.
Okay, so the whole gang says, yeah, we saw Jesus post-mortem appearance. He appeared to us, etc. All right, so that's fine. So they all make that claim. And is your argument that it's true that they died for their claim?
Yes, it is true that they died for their claim, and that lends credibility that they believe that what they were saying was true.
Dying for your claim lends credibility to the truth of a claim?
It lends credibility to the witness. Okay, and particularly these witnesses in particular, because they are in a position to know that whether the claim they are making is true or not.
Okay, so
this is also a very important difference between the death of the apostles and the death of all the other Christians in Rome at the hand of Nero. There's a difference there.
Well, the other Christians who were killed by Nero, they were being killed because he was looking for a scapegoat for the fire.
True. Yes.
But
they could have renounced their I forget if it was Nero who did this or just the rest of the emperors, but they gave the Christians a chance to renounce their faith and become polytheists again and to worship the Roman gods. And they could save themselves that way, but they didn't.
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah. But them dying in that way doesn't prove that Christianity is true. I say the apostles dying for their claim does prove that Christianity is true, or at least lend credit to the idea that they believe that what they were saying was true.
Wait, why wouldn't the Christians who were given the opportunity to change, why would them dying for their beliefs not lend credibility to their beliefs?
For the reasons that you just laid out. I mean, just because someone dies for... just because someone believes in something doesn't make it true.
Okay, fair.
Yeah. And that's why... that's why I'm not talking about the deaths of all the other Christian martyrs ever since the time of the first apostles. I'm concerned with the deaths of the apostles themselves, because those are the guys who know that what they are saying is true or not.
Interesting.
I've got about 15 minutes left.
15?
50. 45.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That's interesting. Okay, I'm looking at the comments from our chat, and I guess I can ask you one of these momentarily. But I do want to ask my question first, which is so we both agree that believing something and dying for something doesn't make it true.
Right.
Unless you're in a special position to know if something is true.
Right, because that's no longer just believing something in the way that you and I think, are using the word believe.
Okay.
Just because I believe that the world is flat doesn't make the earth flat. Just because a plurality of people believing the earth is flat doesn't make the earth flat.
Correct.
Okay?
Correct.
But someone who has been to the edges of the world and seen that it just drops off into oblivion, that person is actually in the position to know that the earth is actually flat. If such a person exists, which doesn't, but whatever. You see what I'm saying? Yeah.
I do see what you're saying. But this brings us back to, but we keep going around the question of how do we know that these accounts are true? And you're saying they're true because they died for them, but as we established earlier, as you told me, that there were churches that used their deaths as evidence of the veracity of their claims.
Particularly in the East.
Yes, but that kind of makes the idea
everywhere else this is not the case, particularly over the Roman world, or the more Hellenized Greco-Roman world to the West.
Okay, but that kind of takes a little bit of the credibility of that statement out of it. If you're saying, well, some people already believed early on that being martyred means a
No.
claim
I
that
said it became that later on.
it became that later on. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so what we're still going around is the idea that the apostles died for their beliefs, which adds credence to their beliefs, because why would they have died for them otherwise?
Yes.
Okay. But what I was saying, the point that I was making earlier was that the people in charge of how the apostles died was the church. So
The people who knew how
organization.
the apostles died.
What?
The church. The people who knew how the apostles died was the church. That's what I say. Or we can even go with what you say. The people who reported how the apostles died was the church.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, again, the church is the entity that stands to gain from their deaths.
And what I'm saying is that no, they don't. This they the how do I get this? In the Greco-Roman world, it's all about glory. Okay, it's all about being the biggest and most powerful. The Roman gods were worshipped everywhere because Rome was the one who was the city that conquered the rest of the world. Okay, therefore, Rome is true because they are the mightiest. But the Christian church, if their leaders die and are dying off and the Christians are being killed everywhere, that's not glorious. That doesn't prove anything to the Roman mind. What that actually does is say that you are weak, you are pitiful, you are insignificant. Your ideas are not to be taken seriously. So it actually makes less sense that the church would report that their leaders were killed for their faiths, unless it actually happened.
Okay, and even if we agree that the Bible is correct in what it says about the apostles' deaths,
the Bible actually doesn't record any of the apostles' deaths, I don't think.
Is that all apocryphal text?
There's one reference in the book of John that comes to my mind, and that's the at the very, very end when John is talking to the allegedly resurrected Jesus. No, excuse me, it was Peter. Peter's talking to the allegedly resurrected Jesus, and it was the idea is that Jesus said something that indicated that John might live for a very, very long time, even until Jesus returned. But then John says, no, Jesus didn't say that I would live until Jesus returned. He only said Jesus only said, if I will it, then I may live for a very long time. And what that's indicating is that the rest of the apostles at the time John is allegedly, we're not accepting this, is that at the time John is allegedly writing this, all the other apostles are dead.
Okay.
So it's also the indication that it's a very late gospel.
Would you say
I forget
that
what this happened? Where were we?
We were talking about the deaths of the apostles. Would you say that Jesus died for people's sins? Yeah?
Yes. Why are we going in this direction?
Okay. Would you consider that he died? Okay.
Is this a chat question or
is this a what?
is this
a chat question?
Oh, okay. Okay.
I'm trying to think about it before I ask you, but I might as well just ask.
Yeah,
It
sure.
says
I'll deal with it.
it says isn't the whole concept it's two sentences. Isn't the whole concept of martyrdom to die for a cause? Was Jesus martyred for people's sins? That didn't really make it. I don't know. What do you? No, not really. I don't. No, I don't
Was
think
was
so.
was Jesus martyred for people's sins?
No, I don't think. No, I don't think so.
He was sacrificed for people's sins. Being
Yeah, but
martyred and
not
being
martyred.
sacrificed are two different things.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
agree. I agree with
yeah,
what you're saying. I couldn't think
yeah,
of the word sacrifice. Yeah, that was.
yeah. Side note: we've been using the word martyr. Do you actually know the etymology of this word?
Do I actually know
Like
the
what this
etymology?
word means? Because
Uh, is a technical term for a person who had died for Christ, according
it's
to Christianity today.
yeah, that's the English meaning of the word martyr, and that's because of the way it came to be used in the early church. But the actual word martyro
Okay.
is a Greek word, and all it means is to witness, or to bear witness, or to witness something. So when we use the word martyr, we attach the concept of death to it, and that's because of the way it was. Uh, uh, that's what it came to mean for the history of the church.
This the according to Christianity today, the early church viewed martyrs. It says how the early church viewed martyrs. It says Christians held a theology of martyrdom that gave them courage to endure. So it sounds like the church understood the source of the martyr's strength and testimony to be the Holy Spirit. Only by his inspiration could such powerful proclamation be given before hostile authorities. What it sounds like it's saying is that what this article sounds like it's saying, and this is from a
Yeah,
Christian
and I
source,
hear you. I hear you. Yeah.
is that martyrdom was seen as giving uh as giving people the strength to continue to fight for their cause. It seems kind of the opposite of we failed. It seems like it's quite the opposite of that from the sound of this.
Yeah, yeah. But here's the thing: Christianity Today. I almost want to ask you: does it list any sources? And I'm
It
not
talks
trying to
about
discredit them. I'm just
Eusebius.
wondering, what's that?
It refers to Eusebius repeatedly.
Yeah, 300 years after the fact. Okay. Um,
I mean, it talks about here we go. Paul and other New Testament authors sustained and developed the theme that followers of Christ were to suffer, not fight for their Lord. A believer's weapons were not composed of iron or bronze, but were made of sterner stuff. Ephesians 6:13.
yes,
Um,
and okay, and here's the thing.
bless, blessed are those
That's
who are persecuted because of righteousness. Matthew 5:10. If they persecute me, they will persecute you also. John 15:20.
correct, correct. But, and here's the thing: we're disregarding the Bible. We don't care what the Bible says. If we start bringing this in, then we have to accept the Bible as a credible source and a credible witness from the
Not
very beginning, which we're not doing.
okay, but it still refers. Okay, but what? But Eusebius was one of the. He was important, wasn't he? What to the church?
He's marginally important to me. He I don't know if he's actually considered a church father, but
No, it just says Greek
he
church historian.
yeah. So, uh, but um, but I think he's the uh, well, one of the things I do know is that he catalogs a list of how the apostles died, and some of them are disputed. That's Eusebius's importance.
Okay.
So, yeah, where do you want to go?
Uh. Well, okay. It just seems that from this source, what it's saying is that martyrdom caused the opposite of failure, is that it pushed them forward. That's at least what this article seems to be saying.
Right, for those who believed it was true. But that wouldn't make sense at the very beginning.
But if you're a Christian, then you believe it's what is claimed by the apostles to have said is true.
I'm sorry, what?
Well, yeah, but if you're a Christian, then that means you believe what the apostles are claimed to have said is true.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So this is saying Christians were persecuted, which caused other Christians to be bolstered in their faith.
Right.
Okay, but that's
and not just other Christians. If we want to go a little bit deeper into this, it inspired sympathy and compassion for them from the crowds who saw these Christians as dying for their beliefs, and it's almost becomes a stick it to the man sort of move to say, hey, why are these people dying for this? This is actually a really cool thing that they're talking about.
But again, that's the opposite of showing of the martyrdom.
Right, we're going in a new direction here. Yeah,
that's the opposite of it being a sign of weakness.
Yeah, and that's what it became to be. But to the Roman mind, that doesn't make sense. What you're seeing here is a transition from a person's Roman mind to a Christian mind of viewing martyrdom as a liability rather than a strength. What I'm saying is the apostles would not have done this if it because it doesn't make any sense to make to become a martyr from the beginning.
But the apostles themselves say, or they say in the Bible, they are talking about the righteousness of persecution.
Okay, and here's what I'm going to say here, all right? Now, this whole time, we've been leaving the Bible off to the side, right?
Okay.
Yeah. If you give me the Bible, then that's going to validate a lot of my claims. It's going to validate my claims that the Gospels are accurate historical accounts.
No, it's actually not going to. It really no.
But these are the things that you're quoting to me.
What I'm telling you is also I'm not even convinced, frankly, that as with most of the biblical historians that Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John necessarily wrote these texts. But I'm not going to get into that because we don't have the time, and that's not the issue here.
Right, exactly. So don't give me the Bible.
What? No. What I'm telling you is, I'm telling you the claim you gave me is that it doesn't make sense for these guys to have been martyred for their faith. That's what you're telling me, and I'm telling you that what the Bible says is contrary to that. I'm not saying that everything in the Bible is true. I'm just telling you that what the Bible is saying, if it's coming from the apostles, they are disagreeing with that statement. They're saying, if someone strikes you on one cheek, turn to him the other also. Luke 6:29. Do not resist an evil person. Matthew 5:39.
Right.
Blessed are those, etc. And so the only thing I'm doing is using quotes from the claimed apostles themselves to rebut the argument that you're making.
That it doesn't make sense for the apostles to get martyred?
Yeah, that's the only thing. That is the only reason I'm quoting these guys right now, is just to rebut that one specific point. Because they are disagreeing with what you're saying.
There it is. And this is, I think, if I'm tracking you right, this is what I'm saying about the difference between the Roman mind and the Christian mind.
Okay, but these guys were Christians.
Yes, and a Christian sees martyrdom as a virtue. The Romans do not.
But again, these were the apostles themselves, And so the apostle, and what you told me is that the apostles transmitted their stories to other people, and those stories spread. And I'm not, again, not disagreeing that the stories spread. I have no problem with that at all. Probably did, but what we're saying, what I'm saying is, what I can see here by reading these biblical passages is that the Christians were at the beginning okay with the idea of martyrdom, and that concept spread to the early church and beyond.
But it doesn't make sense for martyrdom to ever become a virtue.
I mean, I agree. You know, why is martyrdom a virtue? I don't understand. I mean, I guess in some cases, sure, why not? But I guess it depends on how you use martyr, though.
Yeah.
But again, not the issue at the moment. But again, these are Christians who are good with the idea of martyrdom. I'm not talking about the Romans. I'm not talking about Romans.
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking about the source, the acclaimed source of the Christian claims, who were good with the idea of martyrdom. They all said, in some way or another, you are righteous if you are persecuted, turn the other cheek, what have you. They are all saying it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So they are not. So what has been passed along, what spread from the apostles to the rest of the Roman Empire, was that these guys died for their beliefs. That's what's being spread, and that sacrifice galvanized Christianity, early Christianity. Their sacrifices, their martyrdoms, galvanized early Christianity.
And what you're saying is that they were martyred was only a claim and not necessarily the truth. Is that what you're saying?
I don't know if that was true. I don't know if it was true, but all I'm saying is they're saying that there's nothing wrong with martyrdom, and that it's just fine. And so that is,
well, not
contrary,
just fine. It's,
well, if it happens, you know, try not to die, but if you die, at least go down swinging. You know?
Well, not
Also
swinging.
probably.
They said.
No, that's why they said turn the other
yeah.
cheek. So
Yeah.
But
okay, I mean, well, yeah, I suppose I agree with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So martyrdom. So they were always. So the Christian faith has, whatever Jesus said about it, I don't know, but from the apostles who talked about him, who talked about the early Christian beliefs, they are all making this one case that if martyrdom happens, it is virtuous, which is the word we used earlier, or you used earlier, virtuous. So,
are you okay with using that word?
Yeah, that's fine. I don't.
Okay.
I mean, I think that's a good word to use.
Okay, cool.
But and so that in and of itself rebuts the argument that it didn't make any sense for them to die. Maybe not to the Romans. Maybe the Romans didn't think it made any sense. And okay, sure, maybe they didn't. But to the other Christians, it was extremely important. It was extremely important, and they saw it as important.
Right, and that's because of the message they are hearing, if we accept that the Bible is true. But this doesn't make sense for the apostles themselves.
But they're the ones saying, blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness. If they persecute me, they will persecute you also. Turn the other cheek.
Yep, yeah.
Okay, what you're saying is contrary to what the apostles are saying.
I'm saying it's contrary to the Roman mind. If if the Jews are trying to, if these 12 Jews are trying to get more people on their side, they wouldn't go for martyrdom.
No, I said that's fine. I agree that maybe it didn't make any sense to the Romans. I agree.
Okay, yeah, we're still talking past each other somehow then.
Okay, what I said earlier, I totally agree. Maybe it didn't make any sense to the Romans. Maybe the Romans thought, well, if these guys want to die for their beliefs, let's help them. whatever. I don't know.
Right,
Maybe
right,
they thought that. I have no problem with that. That's just fine.
Yeah.
But that's not what the apostles are. But what the apostles are saying, and in the context of the early Christians to the Christians, martyrdom was important. To the other, to the people who were receptive to the idea of Christianity, it became important to them, and the story spread because people were galvanized by the deaths of the apostles. If we say that their death was true, is
Right.
correctly described.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
so,
Okay. I think I'm on board with everything you're saying. Yeah.
okay.
So where do we go from here then?
Okay, so I just want to clear. So I know you're gonna have to leave pretty soon, but I just want.
Yeah. I've got not even 20 minutes left. So.
Okay, well we'll just wrap this up. Okay, so I want to point out.
No. We're so close. We're so close. Come on.
We're almost there. Okay, so what I want to point out is that the case that has been made so far has not been convincing to me because because the early Christians were because it seems that they considered a story to have merit if you died for it, which doesn't make it true.
No, that's us talking. That's us in the 21st century judging the character of the witnesses, is if they were willing to die for it.
Okay, but
now for everyone else in the Christian world, you're absolutely right. It doesn't matter in the slightest how many of them died for for the claim that Jesus rose from the dead. What matters is the origination of that claim, the apostles themselves. They died for the claim that Jesus rose from the dead, and they were in a position to know whether or not that claim was true.
But what we haven't touched on at all is whether that claim is true. We've only talked about
You're right.
whether they thought the claim was true and that they supposedly died for it. And that and the other people receptive to the idea of Christianity were receptive to the idea of martyrdom for an idea. So, and something that we have not seen at all throughout this entire talking, probably because I don't know if I really asked about it, but what evidence do we have that the story really is true, that the resurrection really did happen?
Okay, so the way to get there is to first accept my two claims, which is what this entire talk has been about. It's almost entirely been about that second claim that I made. Jesus Christ died by crucifixion. The apostles claim that he was alive 3 days later. Right there, that second statement, that's where...
Claim.
Yes, that's where this entire conversation has been hung up. We've been trying to get to that point. And then the final part of this conversation is, what do you say happened? What are the logical reasons for why the apostles would make this claim?
Well, as C.S. Lewis said, was he liar, lunatic, or Lord?
Actually, no. What C.S. Lewis is talking about is if Jesus himself actually made his claim for being God, there's only three options. He's either a lunatic, a liar, or he is in fact the Lord. That's what C.S. Lewis is going for. That's not the apostles in my argument.
I think there's actually a fourth option that should be considered, and is what I was talking about earlier, and that was accidental misunderstandings of the story or misremembering segments of the story. Maybe some people.
That's not actually an answer to my question. That's an.
What do I think happened?
Wait, no. That's actually a possible answer to my question, not to C.S. Lewis's question. See, let me lay out a few possible answers. Accepting the premises that Jesus died and that the apostles claimed resurrection. What are the possible answers to what do you say happened? The first possible answer is that it was, as you say, a misrepresentation of a story. that a story legendarily developed, and that there was actually no Jesus
aggrandized or exaggerated over time.
Right, right. So, but that option says that Jesus never existed. Well, and then
not necessarily, no.
Yeah. Actually, it does, because if you're going to make a complete claim, you have to say what Jesus actually was. So there's one claim that Jesus never existed and there was only a story. Two, that the apostles outright lied about seeing Jesus rise from the dead. Three, that the apostles actually believed that Jesus rose from the dead, and they propagated that story. Four, that Jesus actually did rise from the dead, which is my answer. And then we can tack on, those are the four primary answers, the only ones that those are the four primary answers. And then we can tack on other answers, like what you just said, that that Jesus was a real historical person, and that apostles taught about him, and that their teaching somehow mutated over time. Is that correct? Is that what you're saying?
From what I've studied of it, that seems to be what happened. There probably was a real person named Jesus in first century Judea, and the stories about him became aggrandized over time.
Okay, so that's another possible answer. Other answers that we could also give, but these get progressively more
but no,
unconforming to
but I also think that at every step in that story, you can still say that every person who heard the story, from John to Polycarp to Irenaeus, you can still say that all of them believed wholeheartedly that the story was true. It still falls under part 3 or option 3.
Yeah. Well, no. It doesn't fall under option 3, because these are not the people who actually saw or claimed that they actually saw Jesus rise from the dead.
Okay,
so
but
it doesn't
they can
actually
still
apply to them.
Have these
questions about the apostles themselves.
But the Bible wasn't written by the apostles themselves. Oh wait, we're going down that rabbit hole. We don't want to go down that rabbit hole.
Exactly. Yeah.
I don't know. I just see. I just got a comment from
10 minutes.
Okay, well. Okay, I just have to say. Before I go, that from what we've discussed, I'm not convinced that Jesus resurrected.
Nor do I expect you to be from what we cover.
I mean, I have no problem accepting that there was probably a Jesus person in first century Judea, but there doesn't seem to be, from what we've talked about, what we've read, any extra biblical corroborating evidence that what the claims of the apostles say were true actually are true. But maybe we can talk about. Maybe we can discuss that in a different video.
What I'm trying to do is go from the extra biblical evidence to the behavior of the apostles themselves, and then we can discuss whether the claims they made were actually true. Once we agree that they actually made them and died for them.
Okay, but you've got to go anyways. I don't want you to.
Yeah.
To break off on me. So.
No worries.
Thank you so much for having this conversation with me today.
Yeah, it was a good time. Good time.
We were supposed to have it the other day. Was that on Sunday, I think? Or Saturday? It was on Saturday.
Saturday. Yeah, it was Saturday. Yeah.
We were supposed to have it on Saturday, but then I got stuff.
Darn life.
I know internet should be my life. I don't know what's happening to me. But anyways. All right, well, thank you very much, and I will.
The internet is life.
The internet is life, yes. Thank you, and I will talk to you again another time.
Yeah, for sure. I look forward to it.
Maybe we can discuss abiogenesis next time.
If you like. I don't care for it.
Okay. All right, maybe not. Okay. All right, well, talk to you later.
Yep, bye.
All right, bye.